I mean, I think yeah, I totally agree. I mean, just what I told Christelle when she was asking, do we have an assessment tool? We're developing tools that we have because we haven't had a long-running program to necessarily use one, but really, if it's in a very stripped down way, it's either you look at it as quantitative and qualitative data or hard and soft data, depends how you want to define it. We usually, for our quantitative data, we usually use mapping. We're developing a tool right now with the research team through the City Scan tool, as well as through our as you know, Namrata, the SDG scorecard, which is maybe less research, but nonetheless is usable. So I think we have all the pieces there, but we haven't, I think this needs a bit more of a tailored approach. And also to note that there's already, public space has already developed tools. What we're doing, though, is kind of maybe bumping it up beyond a little bit the public space side. So it might be additional things, but I would guess the methodologies would be very, very similar. And honestly, the agency should be reusing Kobo Toolbox and mapping and so on and so on. So yeah, that's my thinking.
Yeah, I mean, I would not include because the public space assessment will come in like Studio 3. But what I would like to understand, for example, from the first one, there's lots, I think, like, for example, stakeholder engagement comes also in the Studio 1 to understand, okay, is there youth organizations working there? Are they active? I don't know, like, how do youth access information? Is this kind of question to understand the ecosystem in place. So beyond the physical component, I don't know how many, for example, useless in slums, or I think these are the questions that I would like to know in the first studio.
I also think so.
Yeah.
Go ahead. I also think so there's governance questions and policy questions. Do they have a policy?
Exactly.
I would do a series of like expert interviews at this stage with a wide cross section of people and use those hypotheses and the research questions that Sherry and Doug had worked on that's in our document to kind of lead some of those conversations, you know, to get a very broad understanding. And then also side by side get some of the supplementary data on how many young people live in the city, how many, you know, organizations or schools or educational institutions exist that cater to that kind of stuff. I don't know whether we have the time or the budget to actually be doing some of that data collection. My sense is probably not. Like if we needed to, for example, if the city didn't have the number of out-of-school kids, for example, or children living in slums, my guess is we're not going to go out to collect that data. So it would be important for us to then speak with organizations that either work with youth in slums or speak with organizations that work with out-of-school kids, and, you know, like, and they exist. And the only barrier we will face is language. And so it will be sort of us creating the research tools, but we will have to work very, very closely with our local teams in the cities to do it. And then the question is, do they have the time to do it all, or do we need to be supplementing their capacity? So that's, in terms of the resource question, that's something we'll need to address realistically.
When each of the countries would hire an urban planner at the full time, just for this project, alongside was a GIS expert, but then there's a senior also consultant at half time, and the program manager. So in Habitat offices, they should be the one, at least the full-timer, he should be, or she, be able to do that, because they're gonna be focused just on this project. Now there's also the implementing partner, which is the cities themselves, who are also getting paid and be involved in the studios or mobilize the young people. So we should also rely on them as well.
Yeah, so and it's also, you know, it's the biggest challenge that UN Habitat has been faced for 20 plus years has been gathering hard data within cities. I mean, a lot of times cities don't have disaggregated data, and you have to, so you sometimes have to just forget even trying to collect, like in Kenya or Nairobi, let's say we were using Nairobi, and you would say, okay, well, how many kids are in school? No one really knows. I mean, we know that 60% of them live in informality, and they're not mapped at all. So, then it comes down to looking at your localized area. So if we were in, again, just using examples, Mathari, we might be able to crumb up with some proxy data to understand maybe what's going on. But in general, this is the huge gap that the agency faces. So we just have to be realistic of what we can get and not go too crazy on too many indicators.
Yeah, we don't have to be like, nitty gritty and too much on things. So that's like for the youth ecosystem and the kind of the landscape analysis in the 3 cities. If I go back to the research component and make sure, I think that's a talk you have to do with Sherry to decide who's doing what. But again, in the research component, we always talked about those 3 pillars. We have the governance, we have the digital, and we have the public space. And I've always seen you, Namrata, in the middle one with the digital engagement and so on. And I'm on the public space and Douglas as the governance and youth. So I'm seeing Sherry as the one leading this whole exercise, telling us what we need to do. And then each of us is taking one of those 3 pillars. This is from the research component. This is how I kind of understood it or thought about it. Any comments on that one?
I think we should just be clever with how we're using each of our time, because it will still be that we might not be the ones executing it just because of limitations of location. And so we should just be we should discuss with Sherry how she sees her role as well, because it might be more collaborative in the way that I see it, and we really lean on her to kind of create the guidance, like the broad guidance, and then I think we should discuss it with her, because because if there's other ways in which our time can be used, if Sherry's doing something specific, like if it's creating an interview guide, for example. Like I could do it, Sherry could do it, like Doug could do it, you could do it, but then it doesn't make sense for all 4 of us to be doing it. And so I think just in terms of using our time wisely, we should think about that.
Yeah, I think this is where...
Go ahead.
No, go ahead.
I think we should also take a capacity building approach to a point. This means that if we decide that we're going to, I think, for example, to do anything on governance, we need to understand policy and what's the general, that kind of stuff. Somebody should go ahead and do that within each of the cities, but I don't think it should be us, because of language. I think we only want to translate once. We don't want to be out there throwing off surveys everywhere. But on the other hand, so we want to build the capacity of the project itself to do that, and those who we're working with, so at least it leaves behind, but also recognizing that that's not working, that we also go in there and do a bare minimum of, for example, a governance survey. But the governance survey, and I agree with Namrata completely on this, could also gather data from other things. We shouldn't be doing 4 surveys. We should not try to overwhelm them. Maybe we should try to look at there's probably going to be a lot of overlap, and so we should make sure we don't, again, overwhelm.
Yeah, and this is where I'm revising the document and seeing, okay, where do we need to do what and who needs to do what? Because we should be benefiting from the studios happening and the participants that are going there to do certain activities at those moments, instead of maybe creating a separate, sometimes meeting or focus group, also just to reduce the budget, allocations and so on. So if she can do that, just to have an overview with the timeline, at least for the first year and a half, of what is happening where and who should be doing it. Because lots of things can be gathered by the IP, by the implementing partner. Lots of other things could be done by the Habitat offices, and some things could be done from HQ, which are for example, more technical things that we have developed that we can guide the country office how to do them. So, but a separate talk with Sherry is needed to explain to her all of this.
That's good for me.
Good. Okay, so I think those two are done. Namrata, just for the last one, which is the digital participatory budgeting. I know here you put the timeline until April, but we discussed that before, that it's basically the whole year, like with me and Pontus divided, so your time is like almost 60-40 or whatever it is. But the idea is it's not like urgent now, but we should start thinking about it. Because just to understand, okay, in the 3 counties, are there democracy platforms that are already existing? Do people use them? If they don't use them, do they know about them? Are they like friendly for youth, or are they complicated and you don't understand? So it's more like mapping what is there already, and then if there's none or if they exist, do we want to use them? Do we want to create something new, etc.? Now there is a $40,000 for developer, and at the time Pontus said it's a fair amount, because in his idea was to base something out of like open source architecture like Decidim, where you just download and you don't need much work to recreate the thing. So, I mean, bear in mind we have 40,000, and it's up to us to decide, do we want to do a call for hiring a developer? Do we think we can use the money in another way? If there's already platforms existing, do we want to create something just for Habitat? It's just like, or like a draft something, maybe 40 can. If the cities already have platforms in place, maybe we can use this 40 to create something that's Habitat owned instead of, city owned. So it's more, yeah. And for that one, the deadline is later on, but it's already good to, start thinking about it this year.
Yeah, no, I think that makes sense. Yeah. Yeah. So maybe once we've had a conversation, Doug, I don't know if you want to should we speak with Sherry like early next week to just get some of the details on the youth ecosystem and the research framework for governance, public space, and digital engagement. And
I definitely we should. And I think Sherry has lots of really good ideas. She's also a practitioner, so we might have to rein some of those back in, because we can only go so far. But I think that's why I'm wanting to record this, because I want her to quickly catch up, and I think she'll easily be able to do that. But we need to make this efficient as possible. But the big thing that I don't want to do as well is I don't want duplication. That we create another platform on youth and governance that already exists. Is there any way we can build into something else, or do we need to have our own proprietary thing, or do we need the same one for across all 3 cities, so on and so on? So we really want to leave capacity behind in the community.
I think the platform is more a budgeting platform rather than a youth engagement platform. And I think the way we can do it is, say, if we set up the participatory budgeting platform and use something that's already available, how do we attract more youth to it will become the question that we need to really focus on.
But that's where we need to, the thing we create aligns with, do they have a youth council? How is their outreach? We can't assume that we're going to be able to do it just through this one program, I think. Or maybe I'm wrong, but we just should be really clear. We don't want to create if you want to create a participatory budgeting platform, which is amazing, it also requires a whole policy infrastructure to work with, and in agreement by the city council that they even do it. Because you can't go off on your own and create that.
Yeah, so the good thing is, like, we're working with local governments. So these are our implementing partners. So it's their willingness to be involved in this, and they knew about the studio. They're aware that this is an activity to be delivered, and they're all been on board. Now the question is, like, do they have it? Have they been using it? These are all questions to be answered, not now, because we don't know if they do use them or not. But as Namrata said, it shouldn't be just like youth focus. It's more like how to encourage youth to know that, this is a way to voice their needs or how public money should be spent when it comes to public space, and they're allowed to decide on this, and it's not just the adult deciding on budgets, etc. And it should be a very simple exercise. And I can link you, Namrata, to Lenny, because we're the planning, finance, and economy section. So finance and economy also falls under us. And Lenny's been working on this. And there has been a methodology on participatory budgeting developed by UN Habitat before. And I remember Roberto started something with the online version, but it has never been published or anything. So we can make the link and try to, set up a meeting to understand what is, if we want to do something more at Habitat side and not individually at the country level. Yeah.
I also realize too that participatory budgeting is a well-trodden path for 20 plus years. And having done participatory budgeting at city level before with teams, it's quite complex because you need a lot of buy-in at a lot of levels to even what does it even mean? So it's as much education sometimes about what the heck that means as it is.
Exactly.
So we have to be also realistic in terms of our goals, that we're not saying to Botner, okay, by the end of this project, we'll have a fully functioning participatory budgeting system that has 5,000 people on it. We might only get to the point of saying we've developed a policy that will facilitate a participatory budgeting process X, Y, Z. So, yeah.
Yeah, and the reason why I put Namrata to put on it early on, because the actual activity of having the participatory process for budgeting is happening in 2024 at the end of it. So from now, at least we have almost a year and a half or 2 years to start having those dialogues with the implementing partner, who are the government, to kind of spread this education that they need to be, aware of this. So we have enough time to start building this, awareness about it and the education and part before we actually implement it. Good.
Cool.
Okay, if there's nothing else, so Tuesdays we're resuming the country meetings. You can choose to join them whenever it's convenient for you. So if you, for example, Douglas, the time you feel like, okay, we're ready to explain the research, you can jump on those calls. It's just placeholders. I will be always attending them for management reasons, but you guys feel free to tell me, okay, I need this Tuesday to talk about this because I need to follow up with the country team. There's also a meeting with WHO next week on Thursday, and I thought it would be nice just for you guys to get to know also Natalie. I think, Namrata, you met Hong there, but not Natalie. So Natalie is the lead of urban health at WHO, just to show faces and show that we're a big group and, make them, know our faces. And then, what else? I think that's it. Yeah.
Sounds good. Doug, do you want to set up time with Sherry next week, or would you like me to coordinate that?
Let's get the recording of this, and at the same time send it to her and say yes. She's actually here in Nairobi, so I can meet face to, and you could also. Have you met her, Christelle?
No, not face to face.
So maybe we can do that as well. She's currently in Tanzania. She's working with IDRC. So.
Okay, can you do that?